Hey everyone, guess what today is? Today is the day that we're going to be making a tool that is both cheap, very effective, and maybe you can buy it. I've personally never been able to find it. Maybe I'm not searching for the right thing, I don't know. But I've mentioned in a couple videos, there's 3 things in this world I hate the most. Yes, I broke my finger, I'm sorry. But those 3 items, not necessarily in this order, are hoses, extension cords, and pullers. Me and pullers don't get along. They move. You always have to have 1,000 different types or 1,000 different purposes, which I guess makes sense. Don't get me wrong, I have no issue with that. My issue is if you are taking a blade adapter off a mower, and it's an old mower, so it's probably rusted on there pretty good. You are lubricating that thing up, you are trying everything you can, putting heat on it, it's not budging. What do you have to do? Well, majority of the time you're going to get a puller. Now, technically what you're supposed to do is find a bolt that is thinner than the bolt that came out and longer. That way you're not pushing any pressure on the threads on the shaft. You're just going directly to the bottom of the shaft where it's just not threaded or drilled anymore. And then on the puller, you're taking the puller and then you are taking the jaws of it and putting it on the actual blade adapter to pull it off. Well, you're going to have to crank down to get that off. What happens? Do you see? I mean, I already ground down, so, but you imagine, well, you know what a bolt head looks like, and you can tell that it's not going to want to stay on there. Any slight deviation of angle, you moving your arm with a ratchet, moving it back and forth, it's going to cause it to wobble, and it's just going to keep falling off. Especially if it's a really stuck on one, you're going to have a real hard time. I made a video on how to remove a stuck blade adapter fast and easy. This is going to be a more permanent tool to add to that video. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link in the description below for that video. It's actually pretty quick and it's fast. Something that I do, and ever since I've done it, I've never really had a problem. So first things first, we're going to do a couple things. We need to figure out what bolt we need. Now, if you have a non-self-propel, more likely than not your blade adapter is pretty small and you're not gonna have to worry too much about it. Sometimes the blade adapter for self-propel, the bolt is significantly longer, the blade adapter is significantly longer, and you can have a little bit of a problem. So what I did, and you can have sizes in between, but these are usually the sizes that work for me. There are some times where I can't, but that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. So I went out and I got about 2 3/4, yeah, 2 3/4, and a 4 5/8 bolt. Now, if you go to your local hardware store, you're going to find these bolts, but they are coated in, I believe, zinc. Some type of coating. Now what we're going to do is we're going to weld it. You do not, I repeat, do not weld it with this coating on there. If you inhale it, it is dangerous, it's toxic, you should not do that. Don't do that. Now that we have safety out of the way, what we're going to do is take a grinder. I still need to do the head. I did a little bit through here. I made it in a square, and the square simply fits over a socket. Now, the socket, what do we need? Well, any size socket. If you get a larger head bolt, maybe you get maybe your socket shouldn't be the 1/4 inch, maybe it should be a 1/2 inch. These are both 3/8, I believe. So I ground both of these screws or bolts to fit inside of the socket. Now, if you don't want to weld it, you don't have to, but this is the tool that we're going to make permanent for only this reason. You can just put it in there and then use it. It will help guide it. It's not as good, but whatever. It still will work. So the important thing is when you look at your puller that you're going to be using, make sure that the I don't know, the bolt, the drive, whatever you call it in the center, fits very well inside whatever socket you're going to have. Mine, both of these for instance are 14 millimeter. That will have a loose fit. It's not going to be too big, it's not going to be too small. I probably could have gone down to 13. 12 is definitely too small. I've used the 12 before and it actually got stuck. Trying to remove a stuck socket off that puller is not the funnest job in the world, and you end up potentially ruining your socket anyway, so don't do that. I went up to 14 for both because that's going to fit loosely enough without getting stuck, and not going to be so loose where it's going to want to, like, you know, tip and back and forth and potentially break itself. So once you have the socket of choice, if you don't have any extras, go to a yard sale, find some. There's always a estate sale somewhere. Find one, pay a quarter, whatever you do, don't get the cheap ones, like the ones that you'd find like in those first time homeowner kits that have like a hammer that does the same thing as a screwdriver, a hammer, a hacksaw, and then it has the ability to put like 4 or 5 different sockets on it. Those sockets are complete junk. Don't do that. You probably can't even weld it. It's probably some type of weird alloy or coated with something that you shouldn't be welding on. These are fairly decent. It's a Craftsman, I believe, both. I don't really know about this one, Stanley. If you have any concerns or doubts, you can just put in magnets. I mean, it's obviously steel. All these are steel, so you should be set. Granted, that's not the perfect way of checking it out, but more likely than not, if it works with the magnet and you get a quality socket, you're going to be fine. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set you up. I'm going to weld this in here like so. Just going to put a tack on either side, and then later I will fully weld it. I'm going to TIG weld it. I'll probably show me TIG welding it. You don't need to TIG weld it. Obviously you can MIG weld it. I just don't like MIG welding. Just not my preference. So I'm just going to TIG weld it. If you do want to TIG weld it, some people, you know, may or may not like that idea, but I personally do. So right now I'm just going to prepare them. I'm going to grind down the tops of both. I'm going to wash them with acetone, get them nice and clean. I don't really want to deal with, you know, bad stuff. And then I'll bring it back and we'll weld. And there we have it, all welded. Now apparently I didn't take off all the zinc, which was unfortunate, but I was wearing my little respirator that I sometimes will put on if I think I might not have removed it all. I went pretty high, but it is, or it could have been something that was on the actual socket. Maybe I got the cheap ones. I figured that they weren't, but you know, I'm also not a welder, so please remember that. I think it's pretty decent for marginal experience. But anyway, going back to the part. So right now you have two. This is going to be your self-propel. That's going to be your standard. If you only want it for your own home, you have a standard, just make one. Or if you self-propel, two. Either way, what you should do is before you build this, you should figure out the size of the bolt that you need, go to the store and grab one. You're going to want to have it long enough where the puller can pull it completely off. The last thing that you will want to do is go through all this and make sure all of a sudden the last inch you can't take it off because you didn't put it in right, or you didn't get a long enough bolt. So avoid that. That will be a major aggravation, to say the least. So make sure that you get the correct length when you're welding it. Make sure it's straight. That's why I tacked it first, and then I kind of verified, and then I started. Other than that, that's it. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to weld it. I just like to, because then I don't have to find another bolt, and lo and behold, every single time I filed one of these down, it just disappeared. This one was going to put in the drawer where my other specialty tools are for random things, Briggs clutch removal tool and valve compressor, you know, stuff like that. That's where these are going to go, and that's about it. Okay, so if you found this interesting, or if you need a good removal tool for a stuck flywheel, stuck blade adapter, and this helped you out, leave a comment below, put a thumbs up. But other than that, this is the best little tool that you can make. I think the whole thing, maybe if you even spent a whole $1 on the socket, it's $2 for one, and maybe $4 for the two, maybe $5 if you get an expensive bolt. If you get stainless, it's even more. But you know, saving yourself a good 13 to 15, 16, 18, maybe who knows, hour worth of aggravation when you could easily just pull this out. Best investment ever. Okay, I'm gonna let you go. Have a good night, and definitely subscribe. See you later.